From the little I know of my life until then, it's not a possibility I could rule out entirely. Even with my less than ideal childhood, one of the small regrets I carry around with me is that huge parts of that boy are lost to me forever. I have a broken, leaking memory of him at best. I guess this wouldn't bother most people. Who remembers what 7 years old was like anyway? But for me, obsessed with memory, with facts, with history on the smallest scale, obsessed not only with the whys, but the simple whos and whats and wheres, it is a nagging absence, like the gap a knocked-out tooth leaves. I know more about total strangers than I do about 7-year-old Edgar. I'll never know what his favorite TV commercial was, or where he hid all the worthless knickknacks he collected, or what he feared most when he had to visit the shithouse in the middle of the night. I'll never know why he crawled under that Jeep. I do know, though, what happened when the bird-boned mailman got back behind the steering wheel of his mail Jeep, released the emergency brake, and stepped on the accelerator. When he felt the Jeep labor against some resistance, maybe he thought it was a bump or a rock in the road, he gave it a little more juice. The back end of the Jeep rose up sharply, dropped back down, and the engine died. The mailman got out to investigate, and when he saw my little body under the bumper of the Jeep, my face mashed into the gravel of the road, blood already seeping among the shards of black rock as if welling up from a place deep underground, he screamed so loud that the dogs in the vicinity, most of them hairless renegades used to the worst and loudest kinds of shouting and drunken argument, howled in terror. Along the street, only a few people came out of their houses, holding their arms against the sun. Grandma Paul took her time picking her way around the woodpile and up to the road. She knew someone was dead or dying. It was just a matter of finding out who. She saw 5 or 6 people crowded around and a few more coming out of their houses, and she decided it had to be a pretty bloody disaster to bring people out on a day like this. Even a couple of huge roadkill fattened crows had landed in the beer tree to see what was going on. "Goddamn mail guys run over somebody's kid," said big Emerson Tuskegee to nobody in particular, sucking down the last of his Coke through a straw. Emerson Tuskegee was well known on the reservation as somebody who held the government responsible for everything. By the time Grandma Paul had made it to the scene, 10 or 12 people were looking down at the sobbing mailman, who had rolled me over onto my back and taken off his shirt, which he held around my head in an attempt to stop the blood from seeping out of my ears. When the mailman realized he couldn't stem the bleeding with only his flimsy government-issue shirt, he took off his pants, an almost impossible task the way his hands were shaking, and pressed them around my head as if he might somehow keep the blood inside where it belonged. Everyone stared at his fiery hair and mayonnaise-colored skin, which seemed to be glowing, putting off a light of its own. "Ambulance!" he cried, looking around wildly. Old Uni Neal had already sent her grandson off to call the tribal police, but nobody bothered to say a word. The mailman put his ear to my chest, heard nothing, then looked into my eyes, the whites of which had turned a stark demon red from the capillaries bursting under all that pressure. He looked up into the sun as if he might find some kind of answer there, but this seemed to disorient him even more. Finally, still holding my head in its bundle of clothes, he lowered his mouth over mine and began breathing into me. Even though my lungs and respiratory system were fine, it was my head that was the problem. "Ambulance'll be coming," someone said, but the mailman kept on, blowing into me with everything he had. Blood gargled up out of my throat, making it difficult to get any air into me at all. Emerson Tuskegee politely tapped the nearly naked mailman on the shoulder and said, "Kid's dead." Everybody pretty much agreed with Emerson on this point, even Grandma Paul. You don't run over some kid's head with a mail jeep and hope to keep him going with a little CPR. The crows looked down and seemed to whisper between themselves. The sun burned and the poor mailman had nothing left to do but kneel on the sharp rocks in the incomplete shade of the beer tree, half naked and shuddering, his face covered with tears and snot, his mouth rimmed with my blood.